I'm really curious from the school side. We've kind of talked now the conference side, but from the school side, the SMU specifically has been passed over a couple times now by the Big 12,
Hmm.
right? I mean, they have tried. I mentioned something in the comments of an Instagram post earlier this week, and immediately I think I had somebody who thought I was talking about TCU lash out saying, what are you talking about? The Big 12 would be so lucky to have them. They clearly haven't asked before. I mean, like, I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, that's just flat out wrong.
Yeah.
SMU has tried for years to get into the Big 12.
Hmm.
The issue is that the SMU doesn't offer something unique to the Big 12 footprint. They already have the DFW Metroplex because of all the other teams: Texas, Baylor, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech. The DFW Metroplex sends pipelines to each of those universities, right? I mean, it's like a conveyor
Yeah.
belt out of the high schools here in North Texas. So SMU doesn't really offer the Big 12 something of value unless SMU was a national power, which they've been really good over the last couple of years. But a national power, they are not. So for SMU, I think if you can get into a Power Five conference in the Pac 12, I think you got to jump at it, right? I mean, this seems like, even though it might not be the most natural fit from a geography standpoint, I still think this has to be a major win for the Ponies.
Oh yeah, for sure. And this kind of represents their chance to get back to where they were before the death penalty, right? And I think that that's a an important thing for them to be able to kind of return to where they want to be, right? They want to
Mhm.
get back to being a bigger pro. There's no reason they shouldn't be. They got plenty of money. They're in a massive market. They certainly have facilities to do what they want to do. So, it's not like they can't get it together to, figure out how to be a good program again. I think it's just time for them to finally make that return to a Power Five conference, to a conference that'll compete to be at the top all the time, and they've been building that with the quality of the product on the field for a while. I know that they haven't necessarily put out the greatest product forever, but they've been returning. And if you think about it, even from 5 or 10 years ago, I mean, SMU used to be the team that you scheduled because you needed an easy win in early September. Right,
Mhm.
you'd schedule them to kind of get stuff right because they didn't really care about their program and they weren't very good and nobody was going over there, but they've slowly been building something that I think could take off if they get the help from a power conference. At this point, I don't care who's outreaching their hand. You get an offer from a power conference, I'm jumping all over that if I'm SMU. If I got to
Right.
go and make my trips out to the Palouse, right? I'm making my trips to the Palouse. I'll head out there, right? I'll do a Tuesday night baseball game in Seattle, Washington, and fly back if that's an option, right? Like if that's what I have to do to make this happen,
Mhm.
I'm doing it if I'm SMU because from a football perspective, you finally get to return to some prominence, right? Now, San Diego State, maybe a slightly different story. That might be more of a scaling in California situation, right?
Mhm.
Now all of a sudden you're the team in Southern California, and you can travel up the road, teams like Cal and Stanford, and kind of dominate the southern part of that state. But I think this makes a lot of sense for both of them to kind of be the next man up. It's sort of like getting the call up in the major leagues, right? You're saying, "Hey, kid, it's your turn. Let's go. Let's see what you can do." I think they have a real opportunity here,
Right.
and I do think it makes a lot of sense for both of these programs to finally take that next step upwards.
Well, and for the folks that are saying SMU and San Diego State won't compete, they won't be able to recruit, they're going to get left behind. I mean, guys, we've seen this kind of expansion work in the past, right? Yeah, I mean, you think of, I think TCU is probably the best, most recent example.
Hmm.
They went all over the place in the early days of Division One football, right? I mean, they were in the WAC, then they were in the Big East for a hot second, now in the Big 12. And sure, it's taken them a couple of years to get to where they are, but they just played for a national championship. So to automatically discount, oh well, those are smaller schools, they're not going to be able to compete. San Diego State is not a small school. Gorgeous campus, by the way. If you've never been
Hmm.
out there, would highly recommend a stop through Aztec Land. But I don't think that's an issue at all.
Well, and on that point, how do you really predict this stuff, right? Everyone, if you look at the last big round of conference realignment, everyone thought Nebraska was going to go to the Big Ten and just dominate, right? They're
Sure.
going to go up there and they're going to take what was theirs, and you're going to be seeing Big Red Nation in Indianapolis every year. And oh, here we go. they've been irrelevant. Like they haven't been a
Mhm.
national program in a long time, and they competed extremely well the year before they left. I think they were even in the Big 12 championship game the year before they left for the
They were.
Big Ten. So,
Yeah, the
I
Mac
mean,
Brown
with
1 second.
the 1 second, yeah, and then Dominican Sue was on that team and everything
Yeah,
else, and so you have to go back and think like this was a really solid program that nobody I think expected to struggle going into the Big Ten, but they did. You can go to the exact same conference, and 1 year later, Texas A&M bolts for the SEC in 2011. 2011, they were in the I think it's now the Texas Bowl, but at the time the Meineke Car Care Bowl, and they beat Northwestern. Behind a 6-6 finished I think 7-6 season, and the very next season a little guy named Johnny Manziel came out, won the Heisman, and they beat the Big 12 champion Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl. So like you don't know what's going to happen year to year with these
hmm
teams. You have no idea, right? TCU was a dominant program, moves to the Big 12, maybe a little bit less dominant for a couple of years, then plays in the playoff, right? And gets to a national championship game. Like you don't know what's going to happen with these teams until they switch, and maybe the culture meshes, maybe their playing style is really good for that situation, and maybe they just have a guy like a Johnny Manziel on campus. They just so happen to have found a diamond in the rough that will give them a spark and a boost and can set them up to succeed in their new conference. You don't really know, and
Right.
that's why we don't make these decisions based on current teams. You have
Yeah.
to make them based on trends, based on where we think these programs are going, and then again on the conference side based on markets and how many eyeballs you think you can bring in and how that strengthens your position with this new realignment.
Gracious. Yep.